Create Mod has so many add-ons at this point that it's not always easy to figure out which ones are right for you. In this video, I'll be showing you 10 different add-ons to enhance your Create Mod experience. Some of these add-ons will allow you to make small tweaks to your gameplay, while others will completely change how you play the game. Let's have a look at our first add-on. Okay, so this is Create Dreams and Desires, and the name of the mod kind of gives you an idea of what this mod does. Really, it's just a bunch of things that you might wish were already in Create Mod, and this mod adds them. So the first thing that we're going to have a look at is the giant gear. So you can see it rotating behind me, and it's so giant that it's huge in my hand, and it's also huge in my inventory. So this gear really doesn't seem to have much functionality except just looking pretty cool. So if we put a gear beside it, it's not gonna mesh, and same thing if we try to put one on the ground. There doesn't seem to be any functionality yet. I don't know if there will be, but for the time being, there doesn't seem to be any. And now if we head over here, we'll see the cog crank. So it's just a crank on a cog wheel. So this looks familiar. If you've seen my videos about Petrol's parts, it kind of looks like something from that mod. There is one difference with that item, and it's that this has a crank on both sides and there's no shaft going through it. So this is something that you have to connect to another cog wheel through the cogs, not through the shaft part, and it does what you'd expect. It's a cog wheel that you can crank. And up next, we have the item stockpile and the fluid reservoir, which are basically just a vertical version of the item vault and a horizontal version of the fluid tank. And this is a quality of life improvement that I think most people would really like to see in Create Mod. So up next we have the kinetic motor, which is basically a survival friendly version of a creative motor. Before you think it's unbalanced, have a look at the output. So really it's only putting out 48 stress units and it can only go up to 32 RPM. I think this is a pretty neat feature. It's the sort of thing that's convenient, but it's not overpowered. And then, whoa, what is this thing? The multimeter. Well, this is just a speedometer and a stressometer combined in one. So multimeter, it gives us the stress units and the RPM. So just like these two individually, this combines them. So the next thing we're going to look at is one of the coolest thing that this add-on gives us. This is the furnace engine. So if you've played Create Mod for a long time, you might remember the furnace engine. So this was before the steam engine, and how it worked was you placed a furnace engine on the side of a furnace. So you would feed the furnace some fuel and something to smelt, and so long as it was actively smelting an item, it would give you power. So you would connect it to this flywheel here and it would generate output. So this gives us 32 RPM at 2048 stress units. So nowadays we have the steam engine, but back in the day we didn't have all that fancy stuff. We had to make do with these furnace engines, and I bet you a lot of people miss them. So this is a nice feature for those that wish that we still had the furnace engine. So the next item in this mod is the redstone divider, and right now we're giving it no signal and it's giving us an output of 32 RPM, which is expected. Now if we just give it a bit of a redstone signal, we'll see that the rotation speed will gradually decrease. So as we give it more signal, it'll gradually go down until it completely stops. So the redstone divider is a very simple way of modifying the speed of rotation. So it seems to be 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%, and then 0% of the input speed. So this is a convenient way of controlling your rotational speed with redstone. Up next is a pretty cool upgrade to the fan. It's the industrial fan. Here I have a fan and an industrial fan, both receiving the same amount of rotation, and you can see that the industrial fan is able to blow a bit further. And another thing is that the industrial fan has these cogs right here, allowing you to connect a bunch of them together in series, which we can see here. So that brings us to the next feature of this mod. These are the catalyst sails. So instead of doing something messy like placing down water or a campfire that you might walk into, or the water might go everywhere, you can just place these catalyst sails, which make the whole thing a lot cleaner. So here we have the splashing catalyst sail, the haunting catalyst sail, smoking, blasting, seething, freezing, and sanding. So some of these are familiar from base Create Mod and others are not. They've been added in to either support this mod or to give support for other mods that have other bulk processing methods. So one of the components that this mod adds that you'll need to craft to have access to some of the higher tier items is the kinetic mechanism. So the recipe to build this is pretty simple. You just take an iron sheet and using a deployer, you place some andesite, a small cogwheel, a slime ball, and a zinc nugget, and repeat, and you'll get your finished kinetic mechanism. So one of these higher tier items is the deforester saw. So at first glance, this just kind of works the same way as an axe, but if I hold shift and use it, well, it's going to cut down the entire tree just like if I use saw blades. So again, if I just hold shift while I break all the blocks, it'll break as if I used a mechanical saw. Now we also have the excavation drill. So it kind of works just like a pickaxe, but again, if I hold shift, well, it'll break things in a 3x3 area. So if I just keep digging down, or maybe I should dig forwards, well, it'll just keep breaking these blocks, and it'll break stone, and it won't break dirt or any ores. So if I'm currently mining stone, it's not going to mine the ores, it's going to ignore the ores. Conversely, I can also hold shift and press the ores and it will only mine the ores. So this just gives you a bit more flexibility on what you actually want to break, and I think it's a pretty useful feature because let's say you have a fortune pickaxe and you're mining with this. Well, you don't want to accidentally break your diamonds when you could use your fortune pickaxe on it. And one cool thing is that you can actually enchant it. So you could actually give this efficiency, silk touch, unbreaking, fortune, and even mending. So if you wanted to, you could give this fortune and just go ahead and break your ores with it and just mine everything with it. But it would also use up quite a bit of its durability as well. So the next item that we're going to look at is the magnet. So how do magnets work? Well, can I just attract things to it? Can I just right click and have things come towards me? No. What I need to do is I need to place the magnet in my offhand, and immediately we're going to see the items start coming towards us. So this is obviously a very powerful magnet, and it attracts things to us. It attracts items to us very quickly. We also get a new tier of sword and tools. So the tools mine faster than diamond. The gilded rose sword, however, has the same stats as a diamond sword. So a netherite sword is actually stronger. So if there is an advantage to the gilded rose sword, I'm not sure what it is. So if anybody knows, please let me know in the comments. And we also get a new music disc, which is called Tchaikovsky's Waltz on the Flowers, and conveniently it's very simple to craft. All you need to do is put some rose quartz into the stone cutter. Dreams and Desires also gives us a wide array of building blocks such as the hazard block, dark metal, and a wide array of these colorful padded rubber blocks. And the last feature of this mod that we're going to look at is the bore block. So this works quite a bit like the mechanical drill from the base create mod. I've gone ahead and set this up on a rope pulley, and if I lower it down, well, we'll see that it'll just mine. So really this is just a neat way of having a sort of custom shaped drill that you can make for whenever you want to drill into the ground. That was Create Dreams and Desires. Now let's have a look at an add-on that allows you to automate enchantment using Create Mod. This is Create Enchantment Industry. So first things first, we need to acquire some liquid experience. So liquid experience is what we use to feed the blaze burners, and then they use that to enchant the items that we want to enchant. So to get that, we're going to need to use this disenchanter here. So the disenchanter looks an awful lot like the item drain from base create mod, though instead of draining bottles and buckets, what it does is it will take the enchantments off of items. So I have this efficiency 5 pickaxe right here, and if I throw it on this belt, we're going to see that it's going to take the enchantment off and send the XP here, turning it into liquid experience. Another way is to simply jump on the disenchanter and it'll drain our experience and transform it into liquid experience right here. So how do we set up our blaze burners to enchant our items? So right here we see that it says active enchantment is efficiency 5 and that it consumes 256 millibuckets of experience. So what we'd want to do, let's say we're starting from scratch. Well, I'd go ahead and place the blaze burner here. We'll see that the pipe is not going into it. The pipe will only go into it once we give it the enchanting guide. So how does the enchanting guide work? Well, if I right click, we'll get this interface and I can grab any book that I want, any enchanted book, and place it there. And it'll say efficiency 5 because it's an efficiency 5 book. If I have a book that has a lot of enchantments on it, I can also use that and then select the specific one that I want to enchant the items with. So you can only choose one. I'm going to grab efficiency 5. I'll just press escape, and then I'll give the blaze burner the enchantment guide by pressing shift and right clicking, and now he'll start applying that enchantment to the incoming items. And if we go and check, we'll see that this is an efficiency 5 pickaxe. So there's also something else that we can do. There's another tier of liquid experience called liquid hyper experience, and that allows us to enchant items beyond what's normally possible. So liquid hyper experience is quite simple to make. You take glowing sacks, you take lapis lazuli, and you take some regular old liquid experience, and you mix it all together with a superheated blaze burner, and you get your liquid hyper experience. But you only get a little bit of liquid hyper experience compared to the amount of regular experience that you give it. So you do need quite a bit of a regular experience to get hyper experience. So right now, if we look at our blaze enchanter, you see that the active enchantment is efficiency 6, but I didn't give it an efficiency 6 book, I gave it an efficiency 5 book. It's just upgrading the efficiency by 1 level. So if I go ahead and destroy it and I place a new blaze burner, and I give it this efficiency 5 book, we're going to see that it's going to start enchanting items with efficiency 6. So by giving it an enchanting guide with efficiency 5, it's able to increase that by 1 to efficiency 6 and apply that to the pickaxes. So I go and grab these pickaxes, we'll see that they have efficiency 6. And the last feature that we're going to look at for this add-on is the printer. So the printer can do 2 things. The first thing is that it can duplicate enchanted books. So here I'm feeding it with regular old books, and I've selected efficiency 5 as the book that I want to duplicate. So to apply a book, you just right click with the book that you want to give to it, and now I've given it a book with a whole bunch of enchantments, and it's going to duplicate that book, and it's going to cost experience to do this. So it's just taking these books, and now it's going to take them and turn them into another kind of book. So if I grab this book, we see that the enchantments have been successfully applied. And the second thing that the printer can do is it can duplicate written books. So you can just give it a written book the same way that you give it an enchanted book, and it will transform the regular books into written books. Now this process will require ink, and to make ink, you can take either some black dye, a wither rose, or an ink sac and mix it up with some water, and it will output that amount of ink. That was Create Enchantment Industry. Now let's have a look at a mod that provides some interesting ways to transmit and manipulate rotational power. This is Create Optical. So the two most important components of the mod are the optical source and the optical receptor. So here I have a water wheel providing rotation, and I've sent that rotation to this optical source right here, and it's sending it to the optical receptor. So I have an RPM of 8, and this is producing 256 stress units. And if I go over here, we see we have the same RPM, but we only have 64 stress units. And that's because the resulting stress units here are going to be 8 times as much as the RPM. So right now we don't actually see any light being transmitted. So is this because the devs are just lazy and they haven't added this yet? Well, no, the answer is because we're actually using radio waves. So radio waves are the exact same thing as the light that we can see with our eyes, except that they operate at a lower frequency, and so we don't see them. So since light is being transmitted, it requires an uninterrupted path. So if I place down a block, we'll see that no light is passing and the RPM will go down to 0. And if there's any entities in the way, the same thing will happen. So let's have a look at what the 4 different kinds of light are. So first we have radio waves, and these operate at the lowest frequency, and they're generated by any power source that has from 1 to 8 RPM. And up next we have microwaves, which operate from 9 to 32 RPM, and visible light is produced by any rotation source going from 33 to 128 RPM. So one of the neat things we can do with visible light is place any kind of colored glass in its path, and it will not reduce the power, but it will change the color of the light. And we can do this with panes as well as stained glass blocks. However, if we use tinted glass, that will break the beam and no power will be transmitted. So the tinted glass here operates exactly like any sort of solid block or any entity getting in the way. And the 4th kind of light is gamma rays, and that is anything from 129 RPM and up. And just as in real life, gamma rays are also deadly in game. So if any mob is placed in the path of gamma rays, it'll quickly start taking damage. So now let's have a look at some ways of manipulating light. So here I've got an optical source, and right here I've got an encased mirror, and what this allows us to do is to simply send the beam of light to a different direction. So here it's going left, and I can also make it go to the right by turning this crank on top, and it sends 100% of the light to the other direction. There are no losses with the encased mirror, so it's a perfect mirror, and it sends the beam of light in the direction that you choose. Now let's have a look at the absorption polarizing filter. So what does the polarizing filter do? Well, first we have to understand that the waves of light are all randomly polarized. So they're all vibrating in different directions. The beam of light is going in one direction, but the individual waves are not all perfectly aligned. Some are vertical, some are horizontal, and you also have everywhere in between. So what this filter does is it will remove exactly half of the light's intensity. So if we go here, we can see that we're at 64 RPM, yet here we're only at 32. And that's because we have a vertical polarizing filter. Now, if I were to come here and put another filter, it would have no effect at all because I've already let through the same kind of light. We're not blocking anything new, we're just letting through the same kind of light. However, if I right click it with my wrench, we're blocking half the light, and then with this positive diagonal filter, we're blocking another half. So we have 64 RPM at the source, which means that we should have 16 RPM at the destination. So now if I were to again rotate this, well, now we have a vertical and a horizontal polarizing filter, and that means that there is no more light going through. So these polarizing filters allow you to control the intensity of the light by stopping or allowing certain polarizations of light through. By default, the optical sources produce randomly polarized light, but you can change the polarization to be either horizontal, positive diagonal, vertical, or negative diagonal. Now let's have a look at the polarizing beam splitter block. So this will split a beam cleanly in two, so it'll send 50% of the intensity one way with a certain polarization and 50% of the light the other way with a different polarization. And to prove this, I've set up a vertical polarized filter on each side, and on this side there's no light going through, and on this side there is some light going going through. We have a source that is running at 64 RPM, and here we have 32, and here we have 0 RPM. If I change the polarization of this filter, well, now it's positive diagonal, so we'll have 16 RPM. And if I change it again to horizontal, we'll see that it goes to 32. And by doing this, we can see that the light coming out of each side is polarized such that on this side, the vertical filter does not stop the light, and on this side, the horizontal filter does not stop the light. And if we come over here, we can see the optical sensor, which outputs a redstone signal based on the percentage of light that's getting through. So this is not based on the RPM of the source. This is really based on the percentage of light. So if I place a polarizing filter here, we'll see that the value will drop in half to 7. And if we place another one in front and give it a positive diagonal polarization, it'll drop to 3. And if we change it to completely horizontal, we'll see that no light is getting through, and the Nixie tube here will output a value of 0. And since mobs stop light from passing, you can also use this as an alternative to a tripwire hook. So you could use this for any application where you need to detect players or mobs like traps or anything else where you just want to be notified or take some action when a mob passes through a certain point. Alright, so let's say you want to transmit quite a bit of rotational energy, but you don't want to build a bunch of optical receptors. You don't want to have one here. Well, there's a block for that. We can use the beam condenser. And what the beam condenser does is it can take light from up to 3 optical sources, and what it does is it outputs a beam of light that has the equivalent power of the sum of the RPMs of each optical source. So here I have 100 RPM going into this optical source, and another 100 RPM going into this one, and they're combined in the beam condenser, and the output is a beam of light which produces 200 RPM. And from that, we get 1,600 stress units, since the stress units are 8 times the RPM. So now what happens if I have another source that's also running at 100 RPM? Well, let's see. Okay, well, it destroys the optical receptor, and it does that because it would send it to 300 RPM, but the maximum RPM that we can have is 256. So what's the solution to that? Well, the solution is to use the heavy optical receptor. So by placing the heavy optical receptor here, we have these 3 beams of light that should have an output of 300 RPM. But what's happening is we're only getting an output of 100 RPM, but we're getting 2,400 stress units. So what's going on here is that this will produce 1/3 the RPM that a regular optical source would get. So really it's giving us the average of each of these optical sources. So since each optical source is producing an RPM of 100, the resultant RPM here is 100 instead of 300 because it's 1/3 of the output of the beam condenser. So we've seen ways of transmitting rotation, but Create Optical also gives us ways of producing items thanks to the beam focuser. So there's some recipes that use the beam focuser, and that's one of the applications that we can use it for. So if I just go ahead and put these glass panes on here, we can see that it'll start processing them. So this is the animation, and we're gonna get some mirrors out of this. Another feature of the beam focuser is that it can dye certain items. So if we place some wool, it'll dye the wool the color of the dye that we've placed in the item filter. So since we put some yellow dye in the filter, it'll dye the wool yellow, and we can also do this with candles. So one thing that I found is that you can put in colored wool and it will change the color of the wool if you pass it through the beam focuser, but if you try to put a colored candle, it's not going to work. So this red candle will not be turned yellow for some reason. The beam focuser will just ignore it. That was Create Optical, a mod that lets you harness the power of light. Now let's have a look at a mod that focuses on adding new equipment and fun gadgets. This is Create Stuff and Additions. So to start off, the mod adds a whole bunch of new armor and tools. So it adds some brass, zinc, and copper tiers. Now, depending on when you're watching this video, copper might already be added to the base game, so this will obviously be rendered obsolete, though it'll still add quite a few new weapons and tools. So in addition to these 3 tiers of tools and armor, it also gives us the gilded quartz tools, the blazing tools, and the experience tools. So the blazing tools do not take damage in the nether, and the sword will burn entities, and the tools will smelt destroyed blocks. The gilded weapons and tools will provide you with additional reach, and the experience tools and weapons will drop experience when used, though they do require experience to build. Now that's all fun and nice, but we also get the slime helmet and the slime boots. So to start off, if I put on the slime boots, well, these will make me bounce. So whether you're in a mood to bounce around or you just don't want to take fall damage, the slime boots are right for you. Now, as for the slime helmet, this will let you stick to any surface. So now I've jumped up here and I'm just hanging by my slime helmet. This might be useful if you're trying to sneak through someplace and you don't want to go on the ground, you just want to go on the ceiling. So to get down, you just press shift and that will make you drop down. So if you're dropping down from high places, maybe it's a good idea to also wear your slime boots. So now let's get to the really fun stuff. This mod adds jetpacks. We get a brass, andesite, copper, and netherite tier of jetpacks. Now these jetpacks do require fuel and water depending on the tier. So the brass jetpack requires both. The andesite jetpack requires only fuel, whereas the copper jetpack requires only water. And of course the netherite jetpack also requires both. So to fuel our jetpacks, we need to use the fueling tank and the filling tank. So if I take a filling tank and I use it on water blocks, I'll start filling up the filling tank. So now when I equip the jetpack, the water from the filling tank in my inventory will automatically be transferred over. And I can do the same thing with the fueling tank and lava. So if I pick up these 6 lava source blocks, that'll give me 600 fuel. And when I put on the jetpack, the fuel will start transferring from the fueling tank to the jetpack. Now the jetpacks are limited to a height, so you can't go as high as you want. The netherite jetpack can fly the highest. This will allow me to fly up 28 blocks, and I can also hold shift to hover in the air, and I can also use it in the water. So now I'm in survival, and if I press space, well, I can fly up to 28 blocks high. And if I let go, I fall, so I should have worn some slime boots maybe. See, I had them in my inventory, but I wasn't wearing them. Okay, well, let's try that again. All right, so now if I press spacebar, I can fly up, and if I let go, I'll fall, and let's see if the slime boots protect me. They do. So if you're flying with these jetpacks, you should definitely wear these slime boots so you don't die like I just did. Now, what I did want to show you was if I hold space and shift, well, that'll make me hover in the air. So that will put me at a specific altitude. If I let go, well, I'll start falling again. So just be careful when you're flying with the jetpack. You can fall down from high places, and if you're not wearing the slime boots, bad things might happen. The mod also adds brass, andesite, and copper exoskeletons, and these give us some status effects. So the copper exoskeleton gives us strength 2 and mining fatigue, and it only consumes water, whereas the andesite exoskeleton provides haste 2 and weakness, and it consumes fuel. And the brass exoskeleton doesn't provide any downsides. It gives us haste and strength, and it consumes both fuel and water. So Stuff in Addition gives us a bunch of fun gadgets to play around with. The first of these is the magnet. So how the magnet works is that it'll attract any items or entities within a 4-block radius. So I've got these armor stands right here. So these are entities, and I have some items right here. And if I place a sheep that's an entity, we'll see if that is also attracted towards me. So now if I hold the magnet, we'll see the items flew right towards me, and these armor stands are also drawn towards me, though a little bit slower. Okay, so you can see the sheep can walk away if it wants to. It can overpower the magnet, but the second it stops, it'll be drawn back towards me. Now let's have a look at the flamethrower. So the second I right click, it'll start shooting flames and it won't stop until I right click again. So very powerful, it can destroy mobs and it can also cook meat. And if we go here, will it set the trees on fire? Well, no, it doesn't look like it sets the trees on fire. So this is an environmentally friendly flamethrower. Now let's have a look at the portable drill. So this consumes both fuel and water, and it allows you to quickly mine most blocks. Though on its own, it'll only allow you to break 1 block at a time. There is an enchantment for it though called digging, and this will allow you to break blocks in a 3x3 pattern with it. So this one is enchanted with digging, and as you can see, it's breaking blocks in a 3x3 pattern. Next, we have the grappling whisk, and this is basically a grappling hook or a hook shot, and this will just allow you to grab onto any surface and swing from it. So this is another place where you'd probably want to wear those slime boots if you were in survival, or I guess just feather falling would work too. Now let's have a look at the block picker. So this is a cool little item that consumes water, and it allows you to grab and move around blocks. So I can pick up a block, I can click again to drop it, I can right click again and put it back where it was, and you can do this without physics mod. There's no Valkyrian skies, it's just create mod and the Stuff and Additions add-on. So this mod also adds drones. That's right, we now have drones in Minecraft, and of course if we have drones we also need a controller. So to control our drones, we just right click them with the controller and they will fly towards us and follow us. So this in and of itself is not very useful, but we can use the up and down arrows to say how far away we want them to be. So okay, we can tell them where to go, but what else can they do? You know, what's the point of them? Well, there's also some add-ons. So the first one is the brass drill head. So if I just right click my drone with the brass drill head, we'll see that it now has a drill sticking out of it. So when it's equipped with a drill, the drone can actually drill into blocks. So if I just put it on this grass block and I right click, well, we'll see that the drone will start to drill. And of course, the drone also has an inventory. So if I right click it, we'll have access to whatever it picks up. Now let's have a look at some of the other add-ons for the drone. So we can put on the fan component, and when we right click, it'll start blowing away any mobs that are nearby. So this is kind of a fun little thing. I don't know if it has any other uses, but I guess it also blows away armor stands. Finally, we can also add the vault component. So if we've added a vault component to a drone, we can now right click on the vault module and we can see that the drone now has an inventory of 9 slots instead of only 3 slots. So of the 3 components, I think that the vault would probably be the most useful in actual gameplay because it gives you access to more storage that you can move around. So mobile storage is always good. The drill is a little finicky to use, and the fan doesn't really have many practical applications as far as I can tell. So the drones are pretty fun. You can fly them around. You can use the arrows to change how far they are away from you, and you can have 3 components to add for them to give them more functionality. That was Create Stuff and Additions, a mod that adds some fun new equipment and gadgets. Now let's have a look at an add-on that adds a renewable source for the decorative blocks that Create Mod provides us. This is Create Molten Vents, and it gives us a renewable source of acerine, viridium, crimsite, ochrum, scorcha, and scoria in the form of molten vents. These molten vents can either be found on the surface or deep underwater in the oceans. If you're playing on version 1.21, there's a config to change whether or not these molten vents appear on the surface or underwater. So how do these vents work? Well, we'll see there's one very important block, and that's this dormant block right here. So it's dormant, and what that means is it's not doing anything. Now we need to wake this up, and to do so we need a TNT explosion. So let's just set off this TNT, and we're gonna see that it's gonna change. It's gonna become active. So now that it's active, anytime I place lava on or around it, it becomes a crimsite block. Now this block is not movable, so you can't move this to your base to set up some sort of factory. You have to do everything physically in the world where this vent appears, which is kind of cool because it gives you a reason to explore and build bases all around the world and maybe set up some train systems or something. So this is a cool mod that allows you to have a renewable source of blocks, and it really fits in with the world. So it really makes sense as to why you would be getting a renewable source of these blocks. Just like in nature, there's some sort of eruption that comes out and produces these blocks. You just have to provide the lava, which I think is a reasonable way to get these new blocks. So 1 bucket of lava gives you 1 block. I don't think this is overpowered. I think this is a very reasonable way of getting a renewable source of these blocks, and they fit very nicely into the world. The next mod on our list is one that allows you to easily build land-based vehicles with both tracks and wheels. This is Trackwork, and it takes rotational sources from Create Mod and meshes that with the physics from Valkyrian Skies, allowing you to build these vehicles. So Trackwork is pretty lightweight as far as add-ons go, so there's only a few blocks that this adds. So first of all, we have the sprocket tracks, and this is where you're going to give rotation for your tracked vehicles, and they come in 3 sizes, the large, medium, and small, and the same thing for the suspension tracks. So the suspension tracks just kind of take up space, and they're what your vehicle will roll on. So this is the part of the track that you will drive, and this is the part of the track that will be in contact with the ground. And we also have wheels, so there's the regular wheel and the smaller medium wheel. So these will be used on wheeled vehicles, and they have the ability to turn and receive power to propel the vehicle forward. We also have the suspension controller, and this will allow you to raise or lower the level of your vehicle. And we also have the track toolkit, and this will allow you to control how hard you want your suspension to be. So with just these components, as well as with what the base Create mod gives us, we can build some complex vehicles like cars and tracked vehicles. So Trackwork doesn't actually give us any way to create physics objects. To do that, you're probably going to want to use either the physics infuser from Clockwork or the helm from Eureka. So we'll have a look at these more complex vehicles in just a sec, but first I want to show you this very simple vehicle here that I have that illustrates how tracks work. So quite simply, we just feed the rotation into the sprocket tracks right here, and we have these suspension tracks down here that are in contact with the ground. So if I were to start from scratch, this is how I would build it. I would place my sprocket track right here to receive the rotation, and I would place the suspension track right here, and you see it kind of just drops down to be in contact with the ground. So you're actually placing them above where they'll actually go. It's a bit counterintuitive, but that's just how it works. And I'm also going to place a sprocket track here, so it doesn't need to receive rotation because this one over here is already getting the rotation. So that's all it takes. I'm just putting it here because I want my contact to be made here and not at the output of these gearboxes because they won't be turning in the right direction for what I need. All right, so this is how you do one side. I did the same thing on the other side. So to move forward, all I have to do is give power to the tracks, and to turn, I can just stop power to one side and just give it to the other side. And if I want to turn the other way, well, I can just flick the other lever, and there we go. So this is just a very simple design just to show you how it works. Now, here I have the suspension controller, and you can just place this wherever you want. And if you start turning it, you're going to see that it's going to start changing the height of the tracked vehicle. So now I'm turning it and I'm dropping down. So it was already at the highest level. And if I just get off, now you can see how low it is. So I want it a bit higher. So I'll go back up here and I'll just crank it in the other way. So now it's a bit higher than it was. And I can also control how stiff the suspension is. So if I take the track toolkit, I can just right click and it'll increase the suspension up to 4. And if I hold shift and right click, it will reduce it all the way down to 1. So I have quite a bit of options here. And wheeled vehicles work in pretty much the same way. So all we need to do is place a wheel where it will receive rotation. So this is a rear wheel drive car, and I have another wheel here that does not receive rotation. So you can have a 4-wheel drive car if you want. And I've done the same thing on the other side. The principle is the same. You give it rotation and it'll start moving forward. Where things differ is if we give a redstone signal to one of the wheels, well, wheels on both sides will turn. So it's smart enough to know that if I give it a redstone signal here, that it should turn in that direction. So if I give a redstone signal on this side, now both wheels will turn to face that way. And just like with the tracked vehicle, you can also change the suspension stiffness using the toolkit. And we can also change the suspension height using the suspension controller. So using what we've learned from these simple examples, we can build more complex vehicles using all the tools that CreateMod gives us. So using these concepts and merging them with what we have from CreateMod, I built a car that's very easy to control, and it does quite well even on this somewhat difficult terrain. So it doesn't need a completely straight area. You can just drive it around the natural areas, though you might get stuck every now and then when you get to a more difficult spot. Like if you have some big cliffs or steep drop-offs like what I'm about to do right now. But you can still recover quite a bit, quite easily, and hopefully you don't tip over. And you can just enjoy driving this around. And of course, the name of the mod is Trackwork, so I'd be remiss if I didn't show you this tracked vehicle that I made. So this one is a bit more advanced than the one I just showed you. I can turn in place and I can reverse. This is pretty simple to set up with some simple redstone, and it's pretty fun to drive around. And I hope that by watching this video, you'll be able to apply what you learned and build your own. Now let's have a look at an add-on that adds a few new tiers of weapons, tools, and armor, and also some new materials. This is Create Ironworks. So this add-on does give us some new tiers of armor and tools. So if we go into our inventory, we can see that it gives us copper, though this will be obsolete soon since it'll be added to base Minecraft. There's also a new bronze tier, some brass, some steel, and for armor, we also have a rose quartz tier as well as a sturdy sheet tier. But that's not why I chose to include this mod in this video. So a lot of add-ons will give us new tools and armor, and there's nothing wrong with those added by this mod. But what's really important about this mod is that it gives us bronze and steel. And of course, if we have bronze, we also need tin, since bronze is an alloy of copper and tin. So what makes bronze and steel so important? Well, the answer is that they're used by other mods, such as Create Big Cannons. So very quickly, let's have a look at some of the items provided by Create Big Cannons. So to make some bronze parts, we need molten bronze. And if we look at molten bronze, we can see that it requires a bronze ingot from Create Ironworks or any other mod that provides bronze and that provides the proper tags. So let's have a look at how to get bronze. So all it takes is some crushed raw copper, some crushed raw tin, and you mix that up in a basin, and the output is a bronze ingot as well as a chance of copper nugget, tin nugget, and nugget of experience. So here I've set it up right here. I just have my 2 inputs into the basin, and out comes the bronze and other materials. Steel is slightly more complicated because you'll need a superheated blaze burner as well as a mixer and a basin, and it takes 2 crushed raw iron as well as 7 charcoal dust to get 1 steel ingot. So the charcoal dust is pretty simple. You just take charcoal and you put it through these crushing wheels, and out comes your charcoal dust. So when you make steel this way, you're guaranteed a steel ingot as well as 2 steel nuggets, and you have a chance of getting an iron nugget as well as a nugget of experience. Now you can also use this recipe using coal dust, and the output is the same, except you get a guaranteed 5 steel nuggets instead of just 2. And of course, instead of using crushed raw iron, you can use a ready-made iron ingot. And I set that up here, and we have our charcoal dust going in here. We have our crushed raw iron going in here, and it's getting mixed with the superheated blaze, and out comes our steel and other materials. So Create Ironworks is only one of many mods that provide bronze and steel in a way that other mods can use them, so that means that they have the proper tags. And there's two more things that I want to show you in this mod. There's the hammers and the paxels. So there's a few tiers of these items, so going from iron to diamond to netherite. So we have the hammer and the paxel. So what do these do? Well, the paxel is a pickaxe, axe, and shovel all in one. And what it does is that it combines the utility of all three, though it's slightly worse than each one individually, because otherwise it would be overpowered. So it's a pretty good axe, a pretty good shovel, and a pretty good pickaxe. So if I just go here, I can show you, I can mine some stone and coal. So it's not as good as a pickaxe or an axe or shovel on its own, but it's a good compromise. And if you don't want to carry around a bunch of tools, it's pretty useful. And what about the hammer? Well, the hammer is another tool that allows you to dig in a 3x3 block area. So this is a pretty common feature in some of the mods that we've been looking at in this video, and I don't blame them because it's a pretty useful feature. So overall, Create Ironworks is a pretty useful mod that gives us some new equipment, but most importantly, it gives us some new materials that are used by other mods. Now let's have a look at an add-on that focuses on the end game and gives us ways of transmitting rotation, items, and more over vast distances. This is Create Utilities. Alright, so the main feature of this add-on is to transmit things over vast distances, such as rotation, items, liquids, and even electricity. So this is done with some specialized void items, and they can be linked together much the same way that redstone works in Create Mod. So it's like setting up redstone links, except instead of transmitting redstone signals, you're transmitting items, rotation, and other things. So in addition to these specialized blocks, we also get some decorative blocks made out of void steel, and void steel is an endgame item that's made by mixing a netherite ingot and ender pearl in a heated basin. And the add-on allows us to further manipulate space-time by giving us the 6-axis gearbox as well as the L-shaped gearbox. And we also get some new amethyst-based items. So we get the polished amethyst as well as the graviton tube that's used to construct many of these specialized blocks. And we also get a couple of decorative blocks. So now let's have a look at how rotation can be transmitted wirelessly. So this is a void motor, and if we look at this one over here, we can see that I'm sending in some rotation from this water wheel, and on the back of the motor there's some items there. So this works exactly the same way that redstone links works. They're just linked together. There's no concept of transmitter and receiver. It's just linking the two shafts together, if you want to think of it that way. And you'll also notice that my face is on there, and that's because this mod has a concept of ownership. So you can have claimed blocks and unclaimed blocks. So this is just for if you're on multiplayer and you don't want someone to just get access to your network. You have control over your own network, and this is important because otherwise you could steal people's things just by putting the right frequency. So there's chests, you could get into people's chest network if there was not this concept of ownership. So here we have a void motor that's receiving rotation, and if we go over here, we'll see that there are two void motors over here. One of them has the same frequency as this one over here, and this one has a different one. And if we go and look, well, we can see that one of them has a spinning shaft, whereas the other one does not have a spinning shaft because it's not linked. And this concept also extends to chests. So here I have 3 linked void chests, and we have items going into this one, and they're popping out of here. And if we look at this middle one over here that's linked to the other two, well, we can see that it's gaining a polished amethyst when one enters over here, and it's losing one when one exits over here. And the same concept exists for liquid, so if I start pumping lava into this tank, we're also going to see it appear in this tank. And if you're playing with mods that add electricity or forge energy, there's the void battery. So here I have 2 void batteries. This one's connected to the electric motor from Create Crafts and Additions, and this one is connected to an alternator. So if I start giving the alternator rotation, we'll see that the battery is going to start charging up. Right now it's charging up the motor over here, and we'll see that the forge energy is increasing because they're linked. So that was Create Utilities, a nice little mod that allows you to wirelessly transmit a whole bunch of things while keeping it balanced because of the end game items required to build the components. Now let's have a look at an add-on for the builders out there. This is a very small mod that allows you to advance the oxidation level of copper by using a spout. This is Create Oxidized. So normally, if you wanted to make a build with a bunch of oxidized copper blocks, you'd have to place out blocks of copper and just wait for it to weather. Now, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just automate the whole process by using a spout with water. And it's not just the regular old block of copper that has these recipes. You can also do this on cut copper, stairs, and slabs as well. And there you have it. That was Create Oxidized, a very small mod that does one thing that really should just be in regular old Create Mod if you ask me. Now let's have a look at an add-on that allows you to customize a whole bunch of functional blocks in Create Mod. This is Create Copycats Plus. Now, I've had a look at this add-on in previous videos, but since then they've added functional copycats, so I'll be focusing on those in this video. Before we get started, I'll just go over the basics of how copycats work in Create mod. So these are the two copycats that the base Create mod gives us. We have the copycat step and the copycat panel. So what we do is we take a block and we just right click it and it will take on that block's appearance. So it won't have any functionality. And if we right click, we can remove that appearance and reset it back to normal. Now what's really cool is we have working cogs that we can use as copycats. So if we just right click the cog part, we can change the cog part's appearance, but we can also change the shaft's appearance too. And we also have copycats of just the shaft without the cogs, and we also have the large cog wheels. So in addition to this, we also have doors. So this is just a regular old door, and I can also individually set the appearance of each part of the door. So here's the iron door, and I can just go ahead and place these blocks on it. And if I right click, well, it's not going to open because it's an iron door. I need to give it a redstone signal. And we also have the sliding doors. And we also have folding doors. And if we come over here, we can see that we also have fluid pipe copycats. Now, we can't right click them with a wrench to make them transparent because that's just going to remove the appearance that we gave to them. So if I right click this, yeah, it's going to be transparent because it's just the base copycat block, but I can't have it be a steel block in appearance and also see-through. So if you want to have see-through pipes, either you just use the base fluid pipe or you can use a regular old copper fluid pipe. And just one thing to note is that even though the mechanical pump looks like a fluid pipe, there's no copycat of it at this moment. And just to prove that these copycat pipes actually are functional, we're going to have a look and we're going to see that there is indeed lava being transferred here through these copycat pipes. That was Create Copycats Plus, a nice little add-on that now allows you to change the appearance of your Create mod functional parts. If you enjoyed watching this video and you'd like to see more, then please consider subscribing and activating notifications. And I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me there. Thank you for watching.